I'm trying to go live with. There we go. All right, cool. Here we go. Welcome to Podcast Answers, the show where I help you start and grow your podcast, answering any podcasting questions along the way. That's right. Today is no different. I am a little bit discombobbled today. I'm trying a few different things. I'm going live on Instagram, which is kind of new for me. I'm doing this with a beta version, not even beta, alpha version of Ecamm Live that supports both wide and tall format. It's a whole new thing. It's a new process for me. So if you caught the beginning of this video and it wasn't exactly professional, that's why. It's because I have to start the whole Instagram Live thing, and it's just interesting to do because I've not done that in a while. So that's something that's going to be new. The other thing today is you can join us backstage at podcastanswers.com/backstage. That'll get you into our Zoom meeting where we have you can just hang out and do other fun stuff, other Zoom stuff, just kind of hang out with us. The other thing is we do have our phone line open today. That number is 574-501-4945, and that gets you right to the studio. You can call, you can talk. 574-501-4945 is our phone number that you can call in live to the studio right now. And if you're not watching us live, you can leave us a voicemail because later it'll let you leave a voicemail. But right now that comes to the studio, you can join us live. You can have a lot of fun with us because we are live. We are going to be talking today about Apple Podcasts. That's right. We're talking about something new that Apple Podcasts has done to allow us to create chapters and links. And that's something that's a little bit new for, at least for Apple Podcasts. You could, before do Apple Podcasts, you could do chapters if you, I believe you could do chapters if you could. No, you could not. Maybe if you added in the RSS or in the MP3 tag, yes, you could. But now they're allowing you to do it. Actually, you know what? They're not. This is all new. Forgive me. There's all sorts of apps do different things with the chapters. And so Apple Podcasts is now going to allow you to do podcast chapters in their chapters. So chapters isn't anything that's really new. We've had it for a while. You could put them in your MP3 file. And what would happen is it would show up and some people may think of it as skipping your content. People sometimes may think, hey, I don't want chapters because it's going to allow people to skip my content and skip what I'm actually wanting them to hear. But if you think about it, yes, it's going to allow them to skip. It's going to allow them to skip. But at what point? Like if it's something specific content, and especially if you're going to be doing a long podcast, a long format where you're talking about lots of different topics or subjects or whatever, if people are only interested in topic Y, then why make them listen through X, Y, and Z? Let them skip to that point. And so what I've done, and again, the thing about that is they can skip around and then maybe they're going to skip my ads that are in there. Well, yes, and they may do that anyways because they can push the 30-second forward thing and skip your ads really easily. So what I do to kind of combat that is I just put my ad right at the beginning of my chapter. So if they're going to be listening to that chapter, they're going to at least hear that starting out. Now, again, how you can provide chapters. So the cool thing about the way that Apple Podcasts is implementing this is kind of the same way that they did with transcripts. So if you don't know, transcripts have been around for a while. The podcast 2.0, podcasting 2.0 has allowed you to create transcripts and chapters, and this is nothing really new, and even links to it. This is nothing really new, but what Apple is doing is kind of the same thing that they did with the Apple Podcast transcripts. Is if you don't provide one via the podcast tag in your RSS feed, then they're going to generate one for you. Now, just like that, you can opt out of that. So I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you decide you don't want them to automatically generate chapters for you, then you can go ahead and opt out of that. Now, I'm interested to see how these chapters work. For me, I usually put chapters in at like an intro. Like, so if you're looking at this podcast, usually it's introduction, kind of where I'm doing the little beginning part where I'm talking about the live backstage, which you can go to at podcastanswers.com/backstage, or our voicemail number 574-501-4945, which at the moment takes you live into the studio if you want to hear that live, but or want to join us live and be able to call into the studio. And then I have one for the main content, and then kind of one as I'm wrapping up with the last thing. So it's not super helpful necessarily for a podcast like this, but we're if there's a podcast where you're talking about lots of different things and you chapter those out, that can be helpful. So Apple Podcasts, they're going to automatically generate a podcast or a transcript. Well, they already do that for you. They're going to auto generate a chapter for you. There you go. And they're going to allow you to stop that if you don't want. But you can also put your own in there. And you can do this by a couple different ways. You can provide in the episode description a time code like 00:00:00, and then you're going to include at least 3 chapters. But if you do that, and presumably if you do a words on that same line, it's going to be the chapter title, I believe. I could not find any good documentation in the Apple Podcasts documentation about how to title your chapters, but it did say like put your timestamp in there 00:00:00, and then you have to have one at the very beginning, and then include at least 3 chapters. You can also include it in your RSS tag with the podcast:\chapters tag. And a lot of podcast hosts support this. I know Captivate, the one that I love, and the one that I suggest allows you to go ahead and put that in really easily right in their interface. And if you want to check out Captivate, you can go to podcastanswers.com/captivate, and that will take you to the area where you can check out Captivate. But so you can either do that in your RSS feed with the podcast chapters tag, or in the metadata ID3 tag, which is that's been around forever. That doesn't allow you to do any links in there. The nice thing about Apple Podcasts, the way that they're doing it, as well as the Podcasting 2.0 is doing it, is you can have links in there. So if you go into the chapters and you want to link out to something, you can link out to it, and then easily be able to go in there and link out to something different. Now, what the nice thing about doing it in your RSS tag as well as your description is you can go back in and edit it really easily. If you're just doing chapters in your ID3 tags, you do that on your computer before you upload to your media host. And so by doing that, if you needed to add a chapter or remove a chapter or whatever, change any chapters, let's say you spelled it wrong, you're going to need to edit that file again, re-upload it again, and then go from there. The Podcasting 2.0 way of doing it with the podcast:\chapters tag is you're linking out to an external file. So you can edit that file at any point. You can go back into your podcast host and say, actually, I want to add a chapter right here. And you can have it put in there, and it's super easy. And then the next time people listen to it, there's going to be more chapters in there. So it's a really genius way of adding chapters into your podcast. So that's the way that I would suggest doing it. If you can, is do it in your media host. And again, if you're using something like Captivate, which is the podcast host that I use, you can go ahead and really easily, right in their interface, edit those chapters. Now, one of the things that Apple Podcasts is saying that you should be doing is you should be including at least 3 chapters so that way that it makes it worth it for the people. And I don't know if that's a limit. And again, I don't know. Some of the stuff is kind of yet to be seen with Apple Podcasts. So I don't know if you're able to go in and I think it probably pulls the file again, updates the chapters that they have for you. But they say limit also to no more than 6 per hour. So have at least 3 chapters, but no more than 6 per hour, because I think that they're saying that that's too many for people to follow through. They also say keep chapters no shorter than 2 minutes. So you should at least have a 2-minute chapter in there to make it worth it for people to go in and select that. They say use title casing. So in other words, just like you'd put your caps in every beginning of every word, they say the best case is using title casing. Now again, this is just Apple's rule, Apple's style guide. So they're saying do this, and also spell out numbers. So if you're gonna be saying something about 6, then you're gonna want to put SIX. If you're saying 6-7, then you're gonna say SIX SEVEN. Yes, I did 6-7. So you're welcome. Now, the other thing that is kind of cool is what they're saying is if they're auto generating for you, you can download a text file with chapter titles and timestamps that they're creating. So you can go ahead and use that, download it so you have it. You can also then use it for whatever repurpose. If you want to put it into, let's say you're using the same audio for YouTube, you can go ahead and put that in your YouTube description and have YouTube then use those same chapters that Apple Podcasts created. Now, you can turn this off in the Apple Podcasts Connect, and this is just for the automated ones, so you can uncheck that, and it's going to take out anything. It won't actually then create or display any automated chapters that they're creating for you. So that way, again, I don't know the quality of these chapters. They may do too many, too few, because you don't really have control over them. They just do them on their own. But from the captioning transcripts that they do a pretty decent job. And so for me, I think I would leave them on. Most of the time I'm automatically creating chapters anyways in my episodes, but not most. So some people that aren't. And so you can turn this off if you want for the auto-generated ones. And again, if I would accidentally skip a day, then it would be okay because it would go ahead and actually create those for me. They say for troubleshooting, you need to have the transcripts turned on too. So if you've turned the automatic transcripts off on your podcast or can't create a transcript for your podcast episode, then it will not create chapters for this. It's going to be doing that based on that transcript that it generates from the audio. They also say episodes shorter than 10 minutes won't have chapters involved in them. So that's good to know. Right now, I'm just over 12 minutes in this episode, but if I was under 10 minutes, then they're not going to automatically generate chapters. Now, again, I'm assuming that if you're producing your own episode and you're producing your own files, then it is going to actually go ahead and honor that fact that you're putting those in there. But I think it's just saying it's not going to automatically generate chapters for podcast episodes that are under 10 minutes. They also say trailers will not have chapters, as well as private feeds too. So if you have your own private feeds in there, they're not going to generate them. It's only going to be things that are going to be in Podcast Connect in Apple for public distribution. Now, the next thing that we're going to be talking about that they have produced is what's called timed links. Timed links are essentially ways that it can pop up on screen and have a link for this. Now, before you get too giddy and excited about this, there's some shortcomings for this. So they'll automatically generate them for you, which again, you can turn off. And I think that I would probably turn this off, or you can do links in your chapters. So I would say that the reason I say you may want to turn them off is it's actually only going to generate links for things like Apple Books, Apple Music, Apple Maps, News, Apple News, Apple Podcasts, Sports, Stocks, TV, and Shazam. So all of the suite of things that Apple Podcasts creates, or Apple creates, is what you're going to be able to link to. So you won't be able to link to other things in there. So you can provide the links yourself by adding them into this description, just like you did with the chapters. You're going to put a timestamp and a link. And again, it's going to have to be links to Apple products, Apple things. They will not put those popping up automatically in your Apple Podcast when you're using any other link like that. Or the other way to put them in is to use the podcast :chapters, like you're creating chapters, and then put a link to that service in the link to the chapter. So again, the Podcasting 2.0 standard allows you to create a chapter with a beginning time and a title, but it also allows you to put a link in there, and that allows you to link out to anything you want. So if you're listening into another app like Cast-O-Matic, I really like Cast-O-Matic. I'm on iOS for my Apple, and I really like Cast-O-Matic. They're doing a lot of new things, a lot of things with the Podcasting 2.0 community, and I like those. And those links actually show up. You can link to anything in there. Apple Podcasts, again, you're going to do it the same way. You're going to create a chapter, but you're going to put a link in there, but it's only going to show up if you're linking out to, again, Apple Books, Apple Music, Apple Maps, Apple News, Apple Podcast, Apple Sports, Apple Stocks, Apple TV, and I'm going to call it Apple Shazam because that's really what it is now. But again, if you're noticing something here, there's a trend. All of those products that I'm listing are Apple. They have the words Apple at the beginning of them. They're just going to be the Apple products that you're going to be able to link to. Now, automatically how this happens, and they say, again, I'm not super clear on this because I haven't seen it in action yet, but what they're saying is automatically when you discuss another podcast, they may detect that you just detected another or talked about another podcast and link to that in your pop-up. I don't know that I would like that, just because the fact that I want to have a little bit more control over what I'm actually linking out to and under all of these things. So I think for my podcast, I'm probably going to turn the automatic detection or automatic links off, just because I don't really want them to automatically detect something else. And I have a few questions too, because what happens if your podcast has a wildly similar title to something else? I mean, if you just go search something like Let's Talk or Talk About It or Smart Talk or anything like that, you're going to get 300, if not 3,000 podcasts back. How is Apple Podcasts going to know exactly which one that you're talking about? So this is maybe where they're saying may automatically detect it, because I'm wondering if they can't say this is definitively the podcast that you're talking about, then they may not link to it. So that's one of the good things one of the things that you need to remember when talking about Apple, as far as the links in Apple. Now, the links are going to appear in iOS 26.2. And again, you can opt out of auto-generated podcasts just like you can with chapters and with transcriptions. You can do that by going to Apple or Podcast Connect, podcastconnect.apples.com. And so that's it, guys. I'm interested to see how exactly they're going to implement this. I'm excited to see what it actually means. I want to see it in production before we get too far on this. But that being said, if you have any questions you want me to answer or discuss on this podcast, feel free to call 574-501-4945, and that will get you to our voicemail. And then also, if you can send it in via a form, podcastanswers.com/ask. I would love to be chatting with you about questions that you have for your podcast. I want to help you start and grow your podcast. So if you have any podcasting questions, again, podcastanswers.com/connect. That'll get you into my DMs, if you will, and allow you to ask a question, as well as calling our voicemail line, 574-501-4945, and that will get you into the voicemail. Have a great week and keep podcasting.